let's talk about membranes. There's 4 different types of membranes that surround and protect structures. Some of them are just going to be a thin film, and then some of them are going to actually secrete a liquid, and that's going to prevent friction. So we'll talk about these and kind of where they are and what they do. First one is called mucosal membrane. And just by the name, you could tell that it's going to be a membrane covered in mucus. And anything that's usually on the outside is going to be epithelial tissue. That's external tissue. It's usually designed to protect from the outside environment. And then this tissue has an added thing, that it is covered in mucus, which sounds disgusting, but what ends up happening in mucus is there's chemicals in mucus and there's enzymes in mucus, and they basically make it so bacteria die. And they can't reach our internal body structures. You can imagine that if bacteria were able to go rampant in, let's say, the inside of our lungs, or in different areas of our body where we have fluids that do happen to have sugars in them, if they took over, we would be at a deficit. So by having these sort of external boundaries, they really help protect us. So membrane bound, they're epithelial tissue, which we've talked about already. They're the outer covering. They're the underlying connective tissue that is known as that basal lamina. Remember, there's that connective tissue that attaches these epithelial tissue to another one. And under that would be the muscular tissue. So we have epithelial tissue, then we have a thin layer of this basal lamina, which is basically something that attaches one structure, tissue type, to another one, which is going to be the muscles. So basal and lamina means below, basal means below, and lamina is just a structure that this epithelial can line to. These lines basically protect external environments like the digestive tract, respiratory tract, and reproductive tract. We don't really think about even males and females' reproductive tract being on the outside, but because outside structures could come inside of them and come in contact with them, or when we urinate, we get exposed a little bit because there's sugars and now watery fluid. We need to have those areas protected by this epithelial tissue and this mucus, which basically is designed to kill bacteria. And then there's another word, cilia. Cilia is this little thin, tiny hairs that basically move foreign particles away. So they basically kick it back out. We have some cilia, like inside of our nasal cavity, that are designed to basically propel them out so we can sneeze them out eventually. We have some from like the back of our throat to, in a male, kind of the Adam's apple, and they're designed to catch things in that mucus and kick them out so they basically get coughed out or spit out. And anything below that, so if it gets down our trachea or it gets down into our lungs, they have these cilia that basically will pick them up and then drop them into our digestive tract. Cutaneous membrane is going to be our skin. It is stratified squamous epithelial, and it's resting on a layer of connective tissue. This totally makes sense. So stratified means multiple layers. Squamous, remember that's the shape of the cell. There was 3 different types. There was squamous, which was that squish type, and then just to review, cuboidal was the square, and then columnar was that sort of column-shaped one, and then epithelial. So it's telling us the amount of cells or how they're lined up, the shape of the cells, and where they are. Stratified, squamous, epithelium. And they rest on a layer of connective tissue, and that connects the epithelial to muscle. It's dry, and it's protective, and it's dry and protective, so other things can't grow on us. Things that really want to grow on us is things like fungus. When we die, fungus and mold really starts to take over, but when we're alive, we have these chemicals that we produce to sort of kill them off. Sphenoidal membrane. These are going to line some joints, and we'll talk about them a little more in the future when we get to ligaments. And they secrete a sphenoidal fluid into the joint. And if I'm not saying that correctly, sorry. So here's a bone, and here is the cartilage, and you'll see that there's this sphenoidal membrane all around the outside, and they secrete a fluid, this sphenoidal fluid. And what this does is it reduces friction. So when the cartilage rubs up on each other, there's a little bit of this liquid that prevents it from squeaking and rubbing against each other and start to rip each other apart. Our last one, which is a membrane that produces fluid as well, is the serous membrane. And they're in surrounding internal membranes like organs and things like that. They cover the organs of the walls and the body cavities, and they produce this serous fluid. So like here you're seeing a picture of a heart, and the heart is actually in a bag, kind of like this. You could see it. And that's called the pericardial bag. And what happens inside of here is this serous fluid. It's just this fluid that sort of surrounds the heart. It does a couple of things. Number one, when the heart beats, it reduces friction. And number two, when things push on the outside of the heart, it protects the heart. So it gives it that two double layers. One is to reduce friction, which is what we really need it for. And two is a little bit of protection.